we are here to bring together some of the Microsoft technologies and allow a space where, one, we can really be centered in those Microsoft technologies around the American Red Cross mission and using that as the foundation for what you are looking to accomplish and how our tools can help you do that. And not just about each individual tool as themselves, but how do those tools intermingle together to create what makes sense for Red Cross. So I'll go through the agenda first to give you an introduction in terms of what is on the agenda, what is included as we lay out this workshop that's been in agreement with the team. Today, we've got day one for 2 hours. The session is 3 days of 2-hour sessions. We've got introductions today, really learning more about ARC, having you guys tell us about the missions, and I've got a few questions that we'll use to probe you on what is true for American Red Cross. What are you trying to accomplish? And then we've got some time where we'll hear from George Diaz and Michael Lord on Office 365 as a service. They'll be going through roadmap updates, integration between apps, when to use the right tool, and then we'll wrap up the day. The full team from Microsoft will be here today at least until 11:15 to understand more about you guys, hear the introductions, hear who is on the call. And then as we go further into the separate days, the particular owners of that product will be there. So we'll have Michael Lord and George Diaz, as I mentioned, for 11:15 on today. Day two, we'll have Tawanda leading us on the Windows conversation, talking about Windows release, Windows imaging, and autopilot. And then we'll transition into security with NS Rana leading us with, this is Brian Jameson, who's leading us in the discussion around security initially with EMS, which was a topic that I believe was hot for you to understand: identity and access management, mobile security, information protection. And then on day three, we are closing out the security conversation with NS Rana, pulling in all of that together under the Microsoft Security Framework and introducing you to what that is. And then we'll close out the day with myself being the lead on change management, helping you figure out how do you not get all these technologies from IT out into the end user population, and how do we make sure that end users are able to adapt to the changes that are coming, making ARC whole from the mission through to the product, down back to the mission of how these products help support the people doing the jobs that further enable the mission. So with that said, our goal for today is to, like I said, help you understand how these products work together to accomplish your goals. That is our roadmap. That is our objective for the day. And I'd love to kick it off and start with introductions, learning more about who's in the room. If you could come off mute, give us your name, your role, and if you have any expectations for today and beyond, or if there's anything you'd like to see added to the agenda that isn't there. So I'm going to just go by what is in the roll call. And Dave, I have you up first.
Thanks, Asia. I don't know if, I guess all the Red Crossers know who I am. If there's some new Microsoft folks on the phone, Dave Bullimore, VP of End User Services for the Red Cross.
Thanks, Dave. Any expectations for today?
Just that people are present and share and learn.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. Doug Dietrich.
Hey, I'm Doug Dietrich. I'm the Voice Technology Solutions Professional. So all things, conferencing, meetings, and voice.
Thanks, Doug. Hi, Dwayne.
Good morning.
Oh, sorry, that was Dwayne Kreider. There's two Dwaynes.
Oh.
What did I say? Which Dwayne are you referring to? Hi, I'm Dwayne Kreider. I'm the Azure Cloud Solution Architect supporting American Red Cross.
Thanks, Dwayne. And Dwayne McNeil, you're up.
Good morning, Dwayne McNeil. I'm with the end user technology solutions team, supporting Office 365, all things Office 365 and SharePoint Online.
Thanks, Dwayne. Any expectations for today or the rest of the week here?
No, just I'm hoping to be introduced to some new things and be able to learn something new.
Awesome. Thank you. Hi, James.
Good morning. Hope everyone had a fantastic weekend. Don't forget that Memorial Day was what it represents. I am your Premier Services TAM, Technical Account Manager, all things service delivery for Premier.
Thanks, James. Hi, George.
Good morning, everybody. My name is George Diaz. I am the Modern Workplace Solutions Specialist. So I focus on aligning business goals with all things around our Office 365, Enterprise Mobility, and Windows 10 platforms.
Awesome. Thanks, George. Hi, Julie Wilkins.
Julie Wilkins, your Microsoft account executive.
Thank you. Karen Dawson. I get it wrong. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Well, how do you pronounce it, please?
Doshin.
Doshin. Okay, sorry.
Like the city, except with a D instead of a G.
Goshen. City. What city is Goshen?
I think it's Illinois.
Oh, okay. All right.
Indiana.
Indiana,
okay. Illinois.
Okay.
Sorry.
There's one in Kentucky. They're all over.
They're all over. Yeah.
Hi, Karen. Sorry about butchering your name. I've got it now. Doshin. Can you tell us your role and what you're expecting today?
I'm in information security governance and a little just understanding of what security, new security stuff, hopefully. And when we're preparing for our rollouts and updates and what we can do to improve on that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Lynn St. Dennis, good morning.
Good morning. Lynn St. Dennis with the governance team in InfoSec. And I am hopefully going to learn about some of the intricacies of your security. So I'm mostly looking to analyze the type of tools that are available and possible gaps in security or responsibilities that Red Cross would need to take, because what I've noticed is a lot of the clients have a illusion that that our cloud vendors keep us secure, and there's a lot of responsibility that we have to take to keep ourselves secure. So I'm going to be analyzing those gaps.
Okay. Thanks for providing that, Lynn. Hi, Mark. Good morning.
Good morning. How you doing?
Good.
My name's Mark Abramowitz. I'm with Information Security, and I'm just seeing what's new and exciting with Microsoft.
All right. Thank you. Matt Fernie, the stranger on the call.
Thanks, Asia. Good morning, all. Matt Fernie, the director of the End User Technology Solutions team, and just looking forward to seeing what y'all have to present on the roadmap and how we might be able to employ more technologies that are part of the suite, and listen and learn.
Thanks, Matt. Melinda Brown.
Hi, Melinda Brown, and I'm with Information Security, and I am just on to listen and learn.
Thanks, Melinda. Michael Lord.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Lord. I am a collaboration technology specialist from Microsoft. So I pretty much cover all the functional capabilities within Office 365 and partner with Doug Dietrich, who's on the call, who covers voice. And between the two of us, we pretty much cover everything.
Thanks, Michael. NS.
Hello, good morning, everyone. This is NS Rana. I go by my initials NS, and I'm a solutions architect supporting American Red Cross. And I've been aligned to your account for the last couple of years. So look forward to the briefings.
Thanks, Ines. Hi, Patricia.
Hi, I'm Patricia Hendricks. I am a new customer success manager. I'm here today shadowing Asia and looking forward to just learning more about the products as well. Thank you.
Patricia. Hi, Tawanda.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Tawanda Emmanuel, Modern Desktop TSP, focusing on your Windows 10 deployment for this particular engagement.
Thank you. Hi, Vikas. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
No, not bad at all. This is Vikas Mahajan. Thank you.
Okay.
And I'm with the Red Cross Information Security team. Certainly eager to continue to learn more what as new features get added, what new security things we have. The other thing I really want to understand is exactly what we own and what we don't. And more importantly, because of our mix of licenses, subscriptions, what we're allowed to use and what we aren't. Because this is one of the frustrations I have is a lot of the security tools only apply to certain license types, but I have no way of distinguishing between those users when we turn on those features. And so I'm afraid to turn anything on because I'm afraid I'll be in violation of Microsoft licensing terms because of the mix of licenses we have. So that's one thing we need to really clarify is what we own, what we don't own, and what we're allowed to use if we have a mix of licenses.
Thank you for that, Vikas. Julie or NS, can we add that as part of the agenda possibly tomorrow or Wednesday?
Yeah, we'll pull that information together and we can take that, first thing tomorrow morning, we can go over the suite of products. Specifically, I think I heard Vikas mention from the security aspect, so we can call it out.
Okay, thank you. William, hello. William Mills, you there? On mute?
Can you hear me?
I can. Good morning.
Okay. Good morning. William Mills, the Director of Network and Telecom Services in Dave's organization. I'm just sitting back seeing what additional information we can learn and how we can apply new features and functionality to the services, especially around the Skype and phone system that we use at our locations.
Thanks, William. And Julie Triplett, I'm imagining that's you on a 770-331 number?
That is me.
Hello,
I
Julie.
am Julie Triplett, and I am part of IT engineering under William Mills, and I like what William said, so I'm going to say ditto. That's why I'm sitting in today.
Awesome. Thank you. And I will add Brian Jameson, who's not on the call right now, but he is one of our security specialists that will be leading the conversation tomorrow when we get to security. So you'll hear more from Brian tomorrow, and he'll be one of the voices that you hear tomorrow that you didn't hear from today. So great. Thanks, everybody, for that information. I'm going to flip the screen over to focusing on Red Cross here and trying to understand and make sure that Microsoft understands what is the true North Star for American Red Cross. And so there's three ways that I think we can capture that. One is understanding why did American Red Cross invest in Office 365? And Dave, I'm not sure if that would be a question for you in terms of what were your thoughts on ARC's reasoning for Office 365 and using that as part of our foundation today. The second question is from the business side, mission side, from if we were to go back to the first slide, at least how externally I see American Red Cross's mission. What is American Red Cross trying to accomplish? What are the KPIs that American Red Cross looks at in terms of success at the end of the year for American Red Cross? Not just from an IT standpoint, but truly from the mission and from the business side. And then the third component is we're here talking about IT. So at some point, IT has to be a focus of this discussion. What is successful adoption from a technology perspective? How do you know when things are successfully deployed, or what is your benchmark on IT success? So Dave, if I can open up with you, I'm assuming you would be the person that might help us answer question number one, why American Red Cross invested in Office 365.
Hey, Asia, I will attempt to answer that. I think anybody on the call could probably do an equally good job at the why. It certainly predates my joining the Red Cross. Like so many other organizations, email drives a lot of things, and certainly Microsoft's dominance in that segment, along with the legacy of Excel and Word and PowerPoint and the Office suite as a whole. And then the Red Cross really got huge into SharePoint, especially SharePoint on-prem. And so there was already a heavy investment. So I'm trying to go back to the specific why is probably a difficult thing, but the continued why is pretty much easy to explain in terms of the investment that's been made already, the amount of effort it would take, quite frankly, to do anything else, and of course, Microsoft's dominance in the marketplace. And then I would be remiss if I didn't point out the fact that Microsoft has been a very good partner as well. Both the support teams that we've had and also from a financial standpoint, they've been a key contributor, and certainly that doesn't really influence our continued business relationship, but it certainly is something that should be said and recognized that Microsoft has been very supportive of the mission in many ways. I think the support team has been improving over time, so we are grateful for all those who are assigned to the account today. As Julie's heard before, my only probably complaint is that I know they stretch you all too thin. They historically always have. I don't think I've ever had in a Microsoft relationship or account exec or their right hand that wasn't assigned to too many accounts, and so that's probably the only rub, and it makes Julie's life more difficult probably than anyone else's. Maybe James as well. I don't know how many accounts he's spread across, but certainly that's been the history. But we are grateful for things. The technology is evolving fairly regularly. In fact, probably too rapidly for us to be able to ingest it and then regurgitate it to our end users to help them make sense of it all and actually realize the benefits. And we're working on some things internally here that will hopefully help in the next 12 months with that. So the why, there's many reasons for the continued why, and I think I'll just leave it at that.
Awesome. I think that is clear. Any other voices that want to add to Dave's statements on why Office 365 at ARC? Okay. We can move on to question 2. From a mission side, what does success look like at Red Cross?
Well, I'll take an early stab at that because I think it piggybacks on what I was just saying about the end user, right? The whole reason we do this is to help make those who are directly conducting the mission more efficient and effective. And I'm not certain that we've really often achieved that. And I think that needs to be our new focus going forward. We need to keep in mind that, our primary objective is not just to check off IT boxes that, we can go into a meeting of peers with and say, we do this and that. We really need to be able to go amongst our users and say, are we making things easier? Are you more efficient and effective in conducting the mission? And that needs to be our primary focus at some point going forward. And so we're going to do some things in end user services to try and help make sense, be maybe a bit more selective about some of the things that we try and get super smart on and pass along. We've got to try and figure out how to mine the nuggets out that are really beneficial given what we know of our end users and what they do, and not try and pass along and communicate and cheerlead everything that comes out, because it's just overwhelming.
Yep, totally agreed. Now, I'll prime you for, I just took a stab at reviewing your website, and I think this came off of the disaster response. I think it was, I have another slide, I think, that says where I sourced this. I'll have to go back and get it. But these are some of the things that came up on that website. I want to say it was around helping to encourage more donations. And so they talk about 8.2 million snacks and meals are served, 290,000 overnight stays, 2.2 million relief items, 188,000 health and mental contacts made. There were some other things that were positioned in terms of the number of miles emergency relief vehicles traveled. All of that I was able to find is really talking about how American Red Cross is serving our country and helping people. From your perspective, would you identify this as success metrics that the people that you're working with might identify with?
Well, these are things that we don't directly influence. So while certainly they're important for folks to be aware of how the mission's being conducted, they're also influenced by a lot of things outside of our control. The weather, just so many other external forces. So from my perspective, what's more important is surveying the end users to determine, and then also looking at analytics, looking at their habits. Have we reduced the number of clicks and steps? Are they happier? Do they express that they're faster, flexible, they're able to get anything from any device? Or are we restricting them in unnatural ways that are impacting their ability to be flexible in carrying out the mission? So that to me is a more important measure of whether we're doing good or not.
And I think absolutely when I think about technology focused and identifying success from a technology standpoint, that I would absolutely agree with. Technology success could be fewer steps, fewer clicks, device access. But when you're talking to the people that are using the technology, do they see success in their job as fewer clicks, fewer steps, maybe better device access? Is that success for them on their metrics they need to accomplish?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to try and speak for them on that. I think that if we do our part, that it will translate into the better, faster, all that stuff related to those higher level mission numbers that you shared. That to me is too removed or too abstract from the actual business of delivering technology, services, and support.
Yes, I agree. So you're not selling that, but what you might be saying is, and as part of your ability to elicit desire for them to use the technologies, is in order to help you get more relief vehicles out, we have tools that will allow you to communicate faster, or in order to allow you to connect with more volunteers, we have tools that will allow for secure external conversations. And so part of understanding what the business that you're serving and what they view as success, it might help you elicit more desire for them to use the tools that you have enabled for them and help them adjust to being able to use those tools quicker, versus sometimes what we see is, okay, I know that I have email and maybe email is a tool that'll, and if we talk, through technology framework, we'll have less traffic in Exchange by using, or we'll have better uptime if we go to Exchange Online versus Exchange on premise. For them, that might be like, okay, that's great, that's nice, but they may not be able to really relate to how that's going to make their lives more successful. But if you can understand what it is that they're driving towards and how you can help them accomplish their mission with these things that you're talking about, we see that as being successful across some other customers.
Okay.
So I would just push everyone to get to that place where maybe as you're having these engagements with the people that you're serving, ask them, what makes you successful? What are the things that you're trying to accomplish in your job? And then as you're building out those communication strategies, as you're working with them, as you're engaging with the business unit, you're asking them to adopt a new phone system, you'll be able to better connect with them on what they view as important versus just the number of phone calls that are made.
Hi. Hey, this is Karen. The I do have an area of the business that they're using a different product, and I talked to them about it. And the reason they're not using the Microsoft tools is because this particular tool um, makes it more efficient in a one-stop shop for communications with email and similar to Yammer or Teams and stuff like that. And they said also whenever they're interacting mostly with disasters, and they said this particular tool is always easily available and able to use, through their phones and, all these different ways. And they just said it was just more user friendly and easier in connectivity with email, Twitter, and all this other stuff that they use in the different types of communication associated with disasters. So they use a different tool because they found it more efficient.
Okay, thanks, Karen. I appreciate that, and I think the key thing that you hit on that really talks about what they're focusing on is interacting with disasters. At the end of the day, they could care less what tool that they use. Obviously, they're not using the Microsoft tool; they're using another one because they have a job to get done, and that's interacting with disasters. And for them, above anything, they need to be able to interact. So whether they use a Microsoft tool, whether they use WebEx, whether they use Slack, it doesn't matter. For them, they've got to interact with disasters and identifying what it is they need to accomplish and how do you best serve them, kind of like what you were just explaining, is how you'll be able to get to possibly get to better success, understanding what it is that they need to do versus just saying, here is the tool that you'll use. Does that make sense, Karen? Oops.
Yeah, that makes sense. I brought up the other tools. They said that they don't like them because, like Teams or anything like that, because they can't cross into the different barriers and in the different types of communication that they have to do.
Hey,
So
Karen, this
that's
is
been the issue.
Michael. This is Michael Lord. I'd love it another time to talk about that a little bit more because it's interesting. We're having a discussion today about some of the roadmap items with Office 365 and things like that. And when I hear that, I'm immediately brought to, well, considering that Teams does interact and interconnect with all of these other tools, it makes me think, how are the tools being used today, the existing tools? So not what is the roadmap moving forward, but when we talk about Microsoft Teams and integration with some of the third parties like Twitter and things like that, it's been around for over a year. So it makes me think, okay, maybe some of the discussion we need to have in the future is also around what are the problems are they trying to solve, and how do the tools exist now in terms of Microsoft's integration with those tools? Because a lot of that's already there, and it just sounds like maybe it's not. There's some awareness that we need to work on, or maybe we need to talk about how things are rolled out within Red Cross to see how it could be implemented and see if it does connect with those who are using that other tool.
Yeah, and theirs was the big point that was made was because they were able to be notified if a disaster occurred, and you do the same thing like you do in Teams, with the @ and call out somebody's name, and they can send messages, and then it sends like to their phone and they get the message. So if it's in the middle of the night, those kind of things. So that's what they said was a key point. The business did.
Okay, well, yeah, all of that exists. So yeah, we can kind of, as appropriate, we can dive into those into the future and kind of talk about, okay, what are some of the specific use cases? Just because we can do a lot of that now. So maybe it's a function of trying to figure out, okay, what is the best way that Red Cross could utilize this to solve this problem and see if it makes sense.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for jumping in there. So of all the other things that were brought up, the only one that's truly mission focused is this sort of interacting with disasters. And we can see how that is leading the way to other scenarios that the end users are desiring. And so once you have a true foundation of what that is, you can help them get to different places. But you're helping them to get there with these definitions of success that you've actually already identified. Are we creating ease of use? Sorry. Do we have multiple devices that they can access? Are the tools that we're implementing? And can you measure that? These are just what we came up with in that previous discussion. Are there other ways that you identify successful adoption from an IT standpoint, not from the mission?
Yeah, I don't have anything else there. The other thing related to the mission is, are we doing things in such a way that we're incentivizing volunteers and staff to remain and say that the Red Cross is making good use of technology? I'm aware of these things. It sounds like the example that Karen brought up, folks are just simply not aware that they can do much the same as they're already doing with some other tools. Just haven't bothered to, nobody's made it enough friction to have them try and change gears. But it's a matter of education, and that's what I was talking about earlier. People just aren't aware of all that they have and how to use it. And I think that's not about the technology. We've provided them so much technology over the last few years that the ability to discern what we have and what should I apply and use. The other example is the ability to share inside and outside the organization. We know a number of groups that use Google to work with other aid partners, and there's a lot of requests for Google Docs access so that they can share. Can they do the same thing in Office 365? I suspect they can, but it's a matter of flexibility and permissions and in that walking that fine line. So my measure of things is really more end user focused. If we're having fewer volunteers and staff on their exit surveys say the reason I left is because the technology is driving me mad, that to me is a positive indicator that we're going in the right direction.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Dave. I appreciate you sort of leading this discussion. I welcome anyone else to jump in with any other input on sort of helping us frame the North Star for Microsoft as we are working with Red Cross, and maybe even potentially for the rest of the ARC audience, just in the example that Karen gave. Okay. Well, if there are any other feedback on this, I think for the Microsoft team, we can use this, and maybe it's that interaction with disasters, retaining staff and volunteers, external sharing, connecting with 8A vendors. We can use that as part of the understanding of what is NASA trying to accomplish, what are the things that they're doing as we have our conversations around the different technologies and tools that we've been discussing. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and Michael and George, I am going to hand the show over to you.
Sure thing. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and share out this deck right now.
You're live for me.
Okay, we're good?
Yep.
Excellent. Okay, so once again, my name is Michael Lord, and at the end of this presentation, towards the end, we're gonna have Doug Dietrich jump in, who is our voice specialist, to talk about some of the voice roadmap. And Asia, we will have some NDA level content in there, so I'll be stopping recording when we get to the very, very end, just because of the NDA content.
No problem.
So when we talk about what Microsoft's doing, just understand to kind of bring it all together and give you that high level understanding that we're looking at how trends exist in the workplace, how people are harnessing their ingenuity, how they're working together and providing their expertise, providing their capabilities across different technologies, and to make folks more efficient at what they do. So really, when we get into a lot of the things that happen in Office 365 and across our integrated platform, you will see these trends coming in. Now, you will hear about something called Microsoft 365. Just to be clear, I just want to make sure that everybody is level set on what Microsoft 365 is, because sometimes you'll see Microsoft 365 come up, sometimes Office 365 come up. Microsoft 365 is effectively a licensing construct made up of 3 products. So when we're talking about Microsoft 365, when you see this stuff on Microsoft's communications, on our websites, understand that it's 3 things kind of pulled together. And that is our Office 365 suite, our Windows 10 suite, and our enterprise mobility and security. I will be covering the Office 365 part today, and the other 2 segments will be coming in later. But just know that you'll see a lot of this marketing around Microsoft 365, and effectively, we just came up with a way to put 3 different purchasing line items into one purchasing line item for things that across capabilities our customers typically need. Now, when we get into Office 365 specifically, we have a series of tools that are built together around our traditional authoring tools, our Word, our Office, our email, our content and intranet management, where you talk about SharePoint and OneDrive, which includes external sharing, actually. We also get into our next generation of communication platform with Microsoft Teams, our voice. We get into analytics like Power BI and Workplace Analytics, My Analytics. How do I make my organization or myself more effective? And then we have our security stack. I will very lightly touch on some of the things happening in the security stack. Know that we have 2 kind of things we talk about. We talk about compliance and we talk about security. We will have the security specialists who will be presenting in the days to come. But ultimately, we're talking about all of these items together across one unified area of intelligence called Microsoft Graph, and across security and compliance. So focusing on pillar 1, we talk about unlocking creativity. So you will see a lot of push in our tools in terms of intelligent apps, in terms of how we visualize information in new ways, how do we more effectively accomplish tasks and get things done, and ultimately allow the flexibility within the user to get to the same endpoint in multiple paths, depending on what's most efficient for them, for their team, or their collaboration partners. Now, you'll see a lot of emphasis on tools that help make things better with intelligent apps is another way of saying bringing artificial intelligence into the workplace. So we start talking about things like PowerPoint Designer and building all of these neat tools and suggestions and clearly and concisely communicating with your target audience. Touch and the actual form factor that you're using. This has been a big focus. This was a big shift between our on-premises SharePoint technologies and Office 365, was making it so that the experience was unified regardless of what size platform you worked on, whether you're working on a tablet, a phone, etc. And as I go through the roadmap items, you'll see heavy emphasis on any capabilities that don't exist within mobile today, bringing those capabilities into mobile so that ultimately it really doesn't matter what you're working on. The experience between a Windows machine, a Mac, or a mobile phone, whether it's iOS or Android, they're all unified. So kind of skipping down to some of the points here, we'll get into teamwork. So in terms of teamwork, we're going to talk about the traditional email and calendaring perspectives, but also some of the new capabilities. The interesting problem that we deal with today is that we have 5 generations in the workplace at one time, and different individuals deal with communication in a different way. So you are significantly less likely to see someone entering the workforce now using traditional communication technologies like email. It's just not typically done amongst the newer generations entering the workforce. So that is where we enter into Microsoft Teams. So Microsoft Teams allows you to communicate through chat, to voice, to ultimately go from individual chat to group-based chat, to build these collaboration environments called teams and ultimately work together. Now, the big part of Microsoft Teams that most people haven't really delved into yet is the fact that you can integrate and extend Microsoft Teams beyond just the Microsoft Teams platforms. You have the ability to integrate third-party apps, and that is everything from third-party traditional cloud storage to actually integration with our third-party partners across different tools. So we have customers out there who are integrating their Microsoft Teams with their Jira workloads. There's a rack of third-party integrations and app integrations that you can use to extend the capabilities beyond just the Office 365 platform. Now, as we start talking about our intelligent communications, you will see a lot of focus on our enterprise-grade calling, all of the features that are being leveraged, that are moving on from our Skype for Business, original Skype for Business server platform, and then on to our modern voice integration. With SharePoint and OneDrive, there is heavy emphasis on the ability to share and work together, including outside of your organization, and being able to build that governance plan around how information is accessed within Red Cross information and the types of security measures you can put around that. And then finally, moving on to just kind of our traditional IT versus modern IT. Of course, this is a SaaS application, and this provides a whole new realm of chances, opportunities, I believe is one way to put it, for looking at how you manage information technology, how you work with your end users to truly enhance the experience as change happens very quickly. So the ability to adapt to changes that roll out and how that looks. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump into some additional discussions around tools and how they work within Office 365. Are there any questions before I move on? Just kind of giving us that level set of technology.
None for me, thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to show you two different slides. One was produced by Microsoft and one is actually produced by a partner. And it talks about how tools get used within Office 365. So the Microsoft tool here is where to start a conversation. So we talk about SharePoint kind of being the core behind that, around your files, your sites, your content, your communication, your information. And then within our different products, Yammer, Teams, and Outlook, ultimately it's what you're trying to accomplish determines where you need to go to produce that. So when we talk about the outer loop, we're talking about broad level discussions, communications across mass individuals, where you get into the outer loop. So ultimately, we're able to build a community. You can have private Yammer teams, you can have open Yammer teams within your organization that allow you to share information in a much broader manner. Whereas the inner loop is where we get into things like Microsoft Teams and some of how we're seeing Microsoft Teams leveraged today by Red Cross, which gets around core projects, core functionality, very quick real-time communication back and forth where individuals are able to share information real time, and they're able to integrate and otherwise include files and that type of transfer immediately. Now, when we get into Outlook, what we're talking about is targeted communications that happen, generally speaking, over time. If you go to the Wayback Machine of the RFCs that were originally built around email, email was not meant to be a real-time communication tool. However, that's how we've come to use it today. Ultimately, as we see new folks come into the workplace, however, email really has been shown to be something that is a targeted communication where response is not immediately necessary. And the chat programs where we look at things like Teams, where we look at the integration of file sharing and things like that, have really taken over for that capability. So we have all three of those pillars. Now, I prefer to use something one of our partners put together. It's called the Office 365 Periodic Table. And this actually extends beyond Office 365, but includes platforms like Dynamics 365 and some of our other products within our business applications element. And I've put the link down here. This is a great thing to look at. But ultimately, it gets into, okay, where are the capabilities and what am I trying to accomplish? So when we talk about things like project management, we look at planner, to do, project online, and ultimately what are the different types that you need to track for project management. Am I looking at just my individual task? Am I looking at very simple management across planner where you can assign tasks to individuals within a team, or am I going to project online where I'm escalating it to the point where I'm running burn down charts and getting to really elaborate project management capabilities? Not every project requires a project online or that level, in-depth level of examination of effective use in a project. However, everybody at a minimum needs to track items that need to be accomplished. And we provide these tools as part of our Office 365 stack to then allow you to determine where things need to go. When we talk about file collaboration and storage, we talk about SharePoint Online versus OneDrive for Business and where information needs to be shared. We use that mantra: SharePoint is for we, OneDrive is for me. And ultimately, we determine, okay, how do I need to surface this information to the organization? That's where Delve comes into play, so that folks can determine, okay, what is the information that's important for me to look at, still security trimmed within their environment. So ultimately, they can't see anything they're not meant to see. However, it helps individuals communicate together and move further. So just please feel free to take a look at this site as well as some of the slides we have. There's not one way to do things. There are multiple ways to do things, and we provide multiple tools to ensure that individuals and teams can figure out what makes the most sense for them. Now, for those who don't know, I'm going to show you right now. Actually, I'm going to do a screen share. One. I'm signed in an Office 365 environment right now. When I look at these applications, I have a list of applications. Office 365 effectively, this is an oversimplification, but I think will help kind of pull it together, is a series of federated applications where you're using a common identity boundary, a common set of auditing and logging, and common sets of integration. So there are a number of applications here that do a number of different things. However, we're putting them all under the same umbrella. And we start bringing in things that are outside Office 365, like Dynamics, for example. They all exist within the same identity framework, within the same licensing framework. So just remember that you have this set of capabilities that all come under a common security boundary, and then you have the ability to turn them on and off based upon organizational needs. Some of that is based upon what you own. There's a difference, for example, between an E3 and E5 and the capabilities you have. However, some of it is just included within any licensing level, like Microsoft Teams, and then depends upon whether or when the organization really needs to roll that out. So all of this exists within this platform. So that's where we like to start in terms of when tools are used and what makes sense. There's no one right answer. Now, let's talk about ultimately digital transformation and what's next. We're going to dive a lot into roadmap items. We're going to dive a lot into how tools are used, what makes sense for the Red Cross is ultimately how we work together to help determine what information needs to be configured or what needs to be rolled out in what context. So there are three general categories that I try to create to help kind of narrow this down. We are seeing a continued extension of artificial intelligence in the modern workplace. When we talk about artificial intelligence in the modern workplace, we're talking about search, we're talking about intelligent classification. How do I determine what information needs to be available to what individuals? How does artificial intelligence, predictive coding, or other aspects of technology really help drive an individual to be more effective. So that is a major theme within Office 365. Everybody likes to talk about artificial intelligence when we talk about building data lakes and doing data analysis and looking at large pieces of information that are common in the Azure stack. But those same tools are used within our Office 365 environment. And I will show you some of that today. Now, we're also working on tighter mobile integration. So as you start looking at, these are all, by the way, Office 365 roadmap items, which we'll get into where we see that information. But when we talk about SMIME integration into the Outlook for mobile app, when we talk about the ability to use your mobile phone and provide those immediate OneDrive links, the ability to access shared mailboxes from a mobile client, this is really where the focus on our mobile integration comes into play. Heavy use of mobile devices has kind of given us a roadmap of how we need to include specific capabilities so that everyone can do everything from their phone. The final category of types of changes we'll see are ease of use. These are things where individuals, groups, enterprises have determined, okay, there are certain things that we need to talk about and certain features that we need to roll out that help make using the product better. So an example would be the adding of up to 100 people to group chat. So when you look at Office 365 today and you look at the environment today, there became a use case where people wanted to have a group chat with up to 100 people participating. So ultimately, we're going to expand that out. We use our user voice platform to really provide that level of integration and features. Also, the ability to do things like share system audio in a Teams meeting. When I'm in a meeting, I want to be able to stream the audio that's coming through my computer through the actual meeting itself. So that's something that's rolling out. Now, if you go to our roadmap site, and I'll just show that to you right now, there are our Microsoft 365 roadmap site, just a publicly available website. The change that occurs in the cloud is happening at a much faster rate. So this includes all three of our products, our Enterprise Mobility and Security, Office 365, and Windows 10. So if you look at things that are happening in Office 365, there are 162 products in development, 62 currently rolling out right now. And most of the dates you will see are within this calendar year. We typically go through a 6-month planning cycle just because of the rate of change within technology. You will see specific features that we talk about in the NDA level roadmap that come out, but generally speaking, we are pushing a good 162 changes plus 62 out by the end of the calendar year. Now, it's rough math, but ultimately that's kind of the target we're looking at, and that's the rate of change that you will see associated with Office 365 and our cloud products. Now, just for reference, as we start talking about these changes, there is actually a feature ID that's included here that has the specific unique ID associated with that change. So ultimately, that if something changes names or a description doesn't make sense, the feature ID is how you truly link multiple products together. Now, as these products roll out into Office 365, there's something called a message center, which is within the administrative privileges of the Service Health Dashboard. The message center will actually tell you as these things are getting into specifically targeting your tenant for rollout. So not specifically that I have something targeted for Q3 2019 or even May 2019, but when is that item hitting my Red Cross instance? That comes within a part of Office 365 known as the message center. So across advanced data governance and a really interesting deep dive into artificial intelligence within the platform. This diagram right now is showing how Microsoft views data governance within the Office 365 system. So it's the ability to either maintain data within Office 365. Think of email. I'm sending email that generates data within Office 365, or importing data from another platform. So within Office 365, we have the ability to build connectors to other systems that are not Microsoft systems, where you can bring that data under the governance model of Office 365. It's called smart ingestion. And ultimately, within data governance, being able to build specific classifiers. So today, a lot of classic tools look at, okay, I'm going to search for something based upon terms that are used. I'm going to search for data based upon these words being used. Well, machine learning and the artificial intelligence processes that we bring to bear are about training the system and using our AI models to allow you to find situations in which those words aren't used. So we worked with the education sector, with schools, and worked a lot on offensive language. So how can, through machine learning, can you identify situations in which, without actually using certain types of words, how can you find when a tone is around bullying? How can you determine that there's communication going on that's specific to kind of the bullying environment with the aggressive language, and able to find it without specifically looking for keywords? Contract language is another one we worked on. Without having the word procurement or contract in content, how do you identify that information is specific to contract, procurement, negotiations, etc.? So this is an example of something that we have done to allow you to leverage tools within Office 365 to identify content. Any questions at this point? So, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's a good overview, and hope people are getting this, because I think this is one of the things that came up in the intro, that people wanted to better understand the suite.
Yep. So let's dive across real quick, and I have some tenant tools open right now that are very specific around the Security and Compliance Center and some of the items that are rolling out. So today, when you go to the Security and Compliance Center, these are, of course, role-based accesses that are above and beyond individual workloads. So let me be clear for those who aren't aware, there are different roles within Office 365 around managing a specific workload. So let me show you here. You can see we have our Exchange administrator, our SharePoint administrator. Well, from a security and compliance perspective, other than the typical administrative functions that you would find, we have created an entire new, effectively an application called the Security and Compliance Center, where you have a completely different set of roles and security permissions that allow you to do things within the system, and they aren't specific to the workload. So where traditionally you might have done things like e-discovery, if you needed to find email, for example, you would have given that to the Exchange administrator and they would have done a search and pulled that back. We are actually providing capabilities like that are separate from the Exchange administrator. So IT doesn't have to be involved in those security and compliance type discussions. That can happen with or without them. That becomes an organizational decision, and ultimately those roles can be handed out, and it is separate than actually administering content itself. Administering a mailbox versus searching through a mailbox become different things. Well, phase one of that was what we're looking at here, which was the Security and Compliance Center. So for those who don't know, there are, I believe it's 36 different permissions associated with this area. And what we would do is we would security trim the options that were available to you based upon what you needed to do. Oh, well, I'm on the DLP threat management side, so I can have those permissions. I don't need to search or do any sort of e-discovery. So those buttons will be hidden from me. These options will be hidden from me based upon permissions. Now, we're looking at an administrator here who has permission. I happen, for this demo tenant, to have assigned everything to one person. It doesn't need to be. A global administrator doesn't necessarily have access to this. They need to be assigned those permissions explicitly. So when we talk about service assurance and the ability to look at trust documents, the ability to look at active cases, when we talk about different reporting options, all of that is different. Well, we've gotten a lot of feedback from our customers, and the big roadmap item here is we're splitting them into two very specific platforms. So they're, instead of having a security and compliance area that has trimming based upon your permissions, we're actually breaking it into two different applications. We're breaking it into a compliance platform. So with compliance, we're talking more about compliance manager, we're talking about privacy, we're talking about information classification and e-discovery, whereas the security center is going to be its own, or is planning on rolling out it being its own separate thing. Now we're talking about building information management policies. We're talking about classifying data. We're talking about, examining spam statistics, configuring DLP. So those are two different functions, and that is our big roadmap item that will be rolled out by summer, is that we'll be splitting these out into two completely different areas that will have two completely different centers and welcome screen experiences.
Is that the separation of duties there, or?
It is. It is. So ultimately, when we had it merged together, we're like, oh, well, you just go in your permissions. Let me go into permissions here, and just based upon, I'll show you. It's just easier to show you. Based upon what my job requirements are, I can grab any of these 35 different roles. And I'm not going to assign all 35 to individuals. Like, I could have view-only audit log access. I could get into search and purge of content for privacy reasons, device management. You really could determine which roles an individual needed in order to accomplish their task. Being able to export data from the system, for example, for, let's say, e-discovery or compliance reasons, is a separate permission. So you could make those determinations. Well, there was a lot of push from our customers because the roles are typically so different between security and compliance, to really not have one center where you can trim it, but to actually break it into two separate experiences. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So that's one thing you will see is you eventually, and this is a typical Office 365 thing, eventually this dashboard will go away. It's actually just everything here happening to the left. We are pulling things into these new experiences of security and of compliance. Now, in terms of changes that are coming to the system, we're also redesigning the Service Trust portal. Has anyone in here used the Service Trust portal? Okay, I will go into it. So the Service Trust portal, originally, back in Office 365, we had this concept of ultimately a dashboard associated with where documents were located. So when you went into this down here, you could get into your trust documents, you could get into your compliance reports. So based upon what you were selecting, see here, North America, and I'll just choose for fun government and save. I could save these settings, and ultimately I could go in and look at trust documents and see all these for all of our cloud products. I could see our ISO 27001 information. I could see our audited controls. I could see NIST. So we have broken that out in our security and trust portal so that it's not specific to an Office 365 interaction, but it's actually in our servicetrust.microsoft.com, where you can see all of these documents. And that gets around our audited controls, our 3PAO assessments, our compliance guides, white papers, everything you could want from a security and compliance perspective in terms of controls, in terms of what's going on within the system. All of that proof in the pudding is within this platform. And
Those
this is
where we download the documents that we need, right?
Yep. So, for example, pen test and security assessment. Here's all the information associated with pen tests and security assessments. These are, of course, governed by the non-disclosure agreements that are part of your enterprise licensing agreement. But yeah, this is everything you could need. Now, one of the additional changes we made. So originally we had this product called Compliance Manager.
Just a second, I have a question about the pen test and security assessments.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So we submit a request from Microsoft to perform those, or we just kick off the scans ourselves?
Okay, so there are two answers to that question. Answer number one is we do all of the pen testing, etc., and make those reports available to you, including the 3PAO assessment, etc. All of that is included. So you just download the documents, and you will find all of the signed and certified 3PAO information associated with third-party vulnerability assessments. Like here's the 2018 third-party vulnerability assessment associated with Office 365. So it was our testing. This particular one was January, February 2018. And this is of course, I'm not going to post this on the internet type of non-disclosure. And ultimately, yes, you can get that information. You can see what we do. Now, we allow you to do your own testing yourselves. However, there are rules of the road on that one that we can go over at another time. Then we have a specific link. So we allow you to do your own testing, but we do our own testing and we have third parties do the testing, and then we make the reports available to you for review.
Okay, so how often are the pen tests performed?
So it will vary across different platforms, no less than annually. The Microsoft is done actually quarterly, and our third-party vulnerability assessment is usually done 1 quarter of the year, once a year. So it's like the testing takes, 2 to 3 months to complete. It's done once a year. We do continuous testing, however, repeatedly, and depending on which item you need, we have all of that available. But the third-party vulnerability scanning includes their 3PAO assessment of all the security controls, etc. So it's more than just the pen tests. It's also all the process review, all the auditing of the tools. Do the tools really work the way you say they work, etc.
And is the pen test just targeted to, what is the pen test encompassing as far as all of the devices in our segment, or just the portals? What is it scanning?
So once again, it depends. So when we talk about like third-party assessment of like continuous monitoring, for example, and looking at vulnerabilities associated with continuous monitoring, that's the entire environment. Is everything patched? Is everything at the level it needs to be? In terms of the specific pen test, the pen tests they perform, our environments are basically cookie cutters of each other. So it will vary. They'll go after different data centers and different aspects of the system across, and they detail specifically for each test what their methodology was and how far they went across. So there's a lot of different answers depending on what they're specifically targeting and what they're attempting to prove. But it's always more than one system. But remember, this is a multi-tenanted environment. Right. And when we talk about Red Cross, you do not have one regional location for this data. You actually have 3. And that is it's almost like a hot scenario, meaning that if you are on the East Coast connecting to data, you'll connect to wherever the East Coast data center is being used. Your data is stored. If you're on the West Coast connecting, you're actually connecting to a different data center, and all that information through TLS connections is replicated real time. So it's it's kind of like a stretch, like when you talk about SharePoint stretch farms, when you talk about Exchange, a distributed Exchange environment, but it's in at least 3 data centers. So all of that is included in their discussion because there are more data centers than actually most people know about. And
okay, and then when these assessments come out, can we configure this so we can like maybe put our email address on, some kind of a list. So then when the assessment happens, it will automatically get sent to us so we can perform a review.
So yeah, so this information does get updated, and there are notifications that are pulled with this through the message center. Matt Fernie, who is responsible for tenant configuration on your side? Is that your organization?
It depends what is being configured, Michael.
Yeah, I think we need to take that offline and determine who is the right person within Red Cross to help. I'm sorry, I didn't know who was talking there.
This is Lynn.
Hey, Lynn. So, Lynn, we need to take this offline and figure out who within Red Cross can help basically configure all of that so that it makes sense to you. Like, all this information is provided. Now it's the function of making sure the right roles are assigned so that you can read the documents. I don't know now if you can actually get here. It's just a permission. So we just need to walk through all that and make sure it's done, and then understand how the notifications will get sent, etc. We can work.
Because does your team have access to this?
I do.
Oh, Karen does. Cool.
And with that whole security permissions model, you can actually allow a lot of people in there, and for example, they could just look at documents if that's what you wanted to do. You could absolutely set that up so that it works in that manner.
Okay, so we talked about pen tests, and then we talked about the, and you guys performed the pen tests annually, but then you said that you will perform Microsoft quarterly. I didn't understand.
So there's a difference between third-party pen testing and internal Microsoft. We have an extremely large security team that does our own testing as well. So we provide reports on that. But it's that difference between yes, we did it, and yes, we did it, and here's the 3PAO signed document from a third party that says, the proof is in the pudding, right?
Okay. And then also, maybe one last question. So when you do these security assessments, let's say that we were responsible for, some kind of patching, and it was a critical or a high or even a medium. Would you notify us of those things maybe on a quarterly basis so that, so that we know that it was overlooked? Do you provide that type of a service as well?
Are you talking about what are the results?
Yeah.
Like if, okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So some of it's all within. Some of that is within the system. Some of it you actually have to go through and get added to the portal. Like there's a whole continuous monitoring section, and there's a whole nother discussion to have on like different types of scanning. Right? There's vulnerability scanning, and then there's actual pen testing, and all the results of that are all contained within the tenant. However, some of it is not natively provided to you unless you sign an extra special. I will not disclose amendment, because if you're talking about, for example, server patching and any servers that may not have gotten a patch, that becomes a real function of security concern to make sure that while we provide you that information, that it doesn't make it out to the community at large. But all of that information is contained within the tenant or within the service trust portal, more specifically, which is effectively, they're just URL redirections. But yes, it's all contained within certain permissions that you can be provided access to.
Okay, Karen, are you familiar with this? Is this something that maybe we might want to request an additional meeting on?
Yes, additional meeting.
Yes, what? Oh, you want an additional meeting? Okay, Karen and I want an additional meeting. This is Lynn St. Dennis. Okay.
And I will include, I'll send an email after this. ARC, Lynn St. Dennis, follow up. Discussion. Did you all just want to cover Office 365, or did you want to talk about Azure as well?
I think it would be good if we talked about Azure as well.
Okay. I will get Dwayne Kreider, who's on this call, engaged in that as well. I just cover Office 365, so we want to make sure all the right specialists around to cover what you need to know.
Cool. Thank
And
you.
Michael, is any of this continued in Brian or NS's components?
Nope, this is the compliance side. There's a much broader discussion that NS gets into that includes some of this. But from an Office 365 perspective, this is where this comes in. Security controls kind of cross boundaries. But no, EMS doesn't specifically cover this side. Okay, so as we go into another set of tools.
One more thing. Also, if you have some YouTube videos, you know, that you're familiar with that you could share with us, that would also be helpful.
Sure. And kind of changing topics, and I'm sure this is going to generate a lot of discussion as well because it's linked, but it's separate. One of our roadmap items is the new compliance manager. And I have a feeling I'm about to show you an old tool, which is what is on the screen that some of you may not have seen. And I will be showing you the new tool as well. So Compliance Manager is our tool that we created to help you better understand from a compliance perspective, what are the roles and responsibilities of Red Cross versus what are the Microsoft managed activities and how are they audited, etc. And basically an easy way to look at things. So within, this is the old Compliance Manager you see right now. And within this, you can create assessments. I've already have a bunch created. I'm just going to grab NIST 800-53, knowing that there was a whole list of them. But you see, okay, what are ultimately the in-scope services for this product? What are the Microsoft managed controls? So if you'll notice, there's quite a few of these controls here. And we break them down by their specific access controls, for example. There are 100 Microsoft managed access controls within audit. And you can dig into the detail, see how they map into NIST 800-53, see where they're tested by. And as you go into the specifics, I'm going to just grab this one, which is access control policy and procedures, control ID AC1A2. You can see specifically what are the implementation details, the test plan details, etc. And it's pretty extensive. And this links many of these link directly to the documents that are the specific audit documentation. So it's an easier way of looking at, for example, instead of just pulling out all these PDFs and trying to read them all, you can actually, we provide you a tool that says, okay, what are the Microsoft responsibilities? What are the Red Cross responsibilities? How are we meeting our responsibilities? And if you choose to use it, this customer managed action section allows you to actually track that side. And to give you a really simple example of what this means, Microsoft has a security vetting process for anyone that works within our data centers, for example, or anyone that works within our help desk. And what are those specific policies are there? However, from an access control perspective, we do not control the identities that you issue. So if you choose to give administrative privileges to a convicted felon, that is a Red Cross responsibility to see if that is within your own security boundaries. However, we will not allow any of our employees to work in that environment who are convicted felons. So we have a background check process, etc. So we go through all those specific details, and that kind of splits out, okay, that's the Microsoft responsibility, and here are the Red Cross responsibilities. So, for example, incident response, there are 14 controls that are spelled out in NIST 800-53 that we specifically recommend that Red Cross go ahead and design around. Some of them are process related, etc. And then we actually link many of these specific things like incident handling, for example, are tied to more than one specification. So not only is it a NIST requirement in terms of incident handling, it's also ISO 27001, it's ISO 27018, FedRAMP if you were government, HIPAA, all of these specifically state an incident handling process. So we do call that out so you understand, okay, this is what Microsoft's expectation is, and here's what you should expect of us, and here's how we quickly link to all the 3 PAO assessments associated with it. We are changing this experience into a new compliance manager experience. Let me go here. So that we can build it more into an action. This is the preview, by the way, of what it's looking at, to more into an action item related control specific. So our assessments are now broken down a little bit differently. I will grab, here's the 800.5.3 for Office 365, and how we show you that same information is broken down a little bit differently. Now you're going to see some government listings in here because of how I specifically classified this tenant, but you can see a little bit differently how these are controlled. And now we start building in little launch now apps to help you understand how those could be implemented. This is an extension of the compliance boundary that is different than Secure Score. Secure Score is basically a report card around your Office 365 environment with recommended improvement actions that are tactical in nature. So we're getting away from, okay, how do I meet NIST? How do I meet ISO? How do I meet HIPAA and high tech? And you get into more security best practices are requiring MFA for all privileged roles. So we have those two specific paths. And ultimately, we give you the flexibility to determine what is important to you and what is not. And we give you a tool to track it if you so choose. I have just as many customers who take this kind of content, export it out, and put it in a Microsoft project. Does it make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So those are some of the big changes we have to the compliance boundaries, to the functional boundaries. I do want to, I believe this is in, we do have changes coming in how we manage information within the system. So we have already started the preview associated with our new governance and protection processes. The protection will come later in the presentations where we talk about information protection. Governance is more about retention and keeping information. It's about privacy, purging information that shouldn't be there. It's about finding sensitive information types within the system and the ability to have non-IT folks make that discussion. DLP comes into this. If I identify that there's healthcare information transmitted in email, do I slap an encryption policy on top of it that works and it integrates across the third party? All of this is an option, and as we extend it into teams and extend the boundaries further, those are coming into play. Information protection, just to kind of give you a teaser of what's coming in that. Microsoft has made a concerted effort to take all of these tools and spread them across our ecosystem. So as we start talking about things like terms you may have heard called Azure Information Protection, we pulled it up a level and called it Microsoft Information Protection. And we've applied those encryption capabilities, those labeling capabilities, that access capabilities across our entire stack. So when we talk about, for example, classifying information within Office 365 so that it do not print is specific to that Word file, Adobe will honor that. SharePoint will honor that. Outlook will honor that. Windows will honor that. The ability to create these security rules and then push them across the entire environment has been the big focus of that. Now, with that, I'd like to hand it over to Doug. Can we go ahead and stop recording, Asia?
Yep, I'll stop it now.
So I will